Thank you.
Please can I welcome everyone to this extraordinary meeting of the Council in the Council Chamber at Castle Hill, Winchester. Members, our main item of business this evening and the purpose for convening this extraordinary meeting is the Council's consideration of a report of the Leader of the Council concerning an agreement to a joint interim plan regarding local government reorganisation in Hampshire and the Solent. The Council will be invited to consider the Cabinet report of the 20th of March 2025 and make any comments for the Cabinet to consider. This report and the recommendations for Council are set out in your report pack. Members, as is usual for extraordinary meetings of the Council, other than declarations of interest and apologies, regular agenda items such as minutes of previous meetings and announcements are excluded. Councillor questions are normally taken at the end of the agenda, but as these are required to relate to the substantive agenda item, these will be heard before we move to the main business before them. Please note there are no questions from members of the public this evening. Please, before we move to the agenda, can I announce apologies? And apologies for this evening have been received from Councillors Cremoyson, Cunningham and Brooke. Right. We'll now move on to the first agenda item, disclosure of interests. Are there any disclosures of interest to be made regarding the business before us this evening? Thank you. Right.
Wallace wants to make a declaration.
Yes, yes, sorry, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of the items on the agenda due to my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. However, as there's no material conflict of interest regarding these items, I have a dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on these matters.
I have the same interest. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Same interest, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to make the same declaration.
And me too as well, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I was going to get the piece of paper off Malcolm, but I thought it's just easier to say me too.
The next agenda item is item 2, questions from members. Oh, we've had that one. No, we're not having any. We haven't got any questions. So we'll skip on quickly to agenda item 3, which is questions from members of council. Councillor Lee submitted 2 questions for this evening's meeting. Councillor Lee, as usual, are invited to read out your questions or refer to them as set out. And if you could refer to them in the order in which they are published on the website, and you can of course ask supplementary questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you're happy, Mr. Mayor, all I will do is refer to the question in the papers and then ask the question, which I think will just speed up the process. So the question is, does Cabinet recognise the risk as I've laid out? And if so, will Winchester push to become a voting constituent member of the transition male combined county authority with other district councils until optimal local government reorganisation, single-tier governance arrangements with the strategic combined authority are fully in place?
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Lee. Yes, in essence. I mean, we believe there should be fuller representation of districts, although I think I'm not sure it's legally possible to be a constituent member, but we can be a voting non-constituent member. And so we believe the government's devolution plans would allow us that. We will be making this point in our response to the government's consultation. The County Council's draft response to devolution appears to explicitly remove district councils from governance, which is a matter of concern which I will be raising with the leader there. And so I would also ask any county councillors present to consider challenging this at the county meeting tomorrow.
Have a supplementary?
No, I do not. Thank you very much.
Well, in that case, do you want to go on to your second question?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I will just refer to the question, which hopefully everyone's had a chance to read. So how does reorganisation support the claim of improved democratic representation and better local government?
Councillor Lee, thank you very much indeed for your question. Taking the government's criteria at face value, it doesn't. Larger and more remote councils, fewer representatives covering significantly larger areas. If we don't make local responsiveness a huge priority going forward, people will feel worse represented because they will be worse represented. The government also needs to seriously engage on the question of local government finance. If they don't, the impact of rapidly increasing demand and cost of social care and children's services and homelessness on everything else that councils do will mean that the most visible public services will also get worse. So there will be worse representation and worse services. That's why the paper that we are discussing this evening explicitly raises the question of scale as one of the issues that needs to be addressed, scale and community, and explicitly raises the associated question of community representation. And it, most importantly of all, given the situation we're in, explicitly raises the question of finance. But, you know, there is a route for this to actually lead to better local government. Let's not forget that Winchester was a unitary council without a second tier for most of its history. At various times, in addition to its current responsibilities, the City Council has run gas, water, sewage, primary schools, roads, libraries, police, fire, and the courts. County officials had no say at all in how we were run for most of our history. And we also all know the frustration when things get held up because we can't get the county to move at the same speed as the city. So unitarisation, local government reorganisation, could be an opportunity. For example, combining transport planning with development planning, combining homelessness services with social care, putting all the levers to create better places into one place. So the real frustration with what's in front of us at the moment is this could be good, but it will require the government to listen seriously to our challenges and concerns and respond. Because if they don't listen and adjust, there's a very serious risk that this could all be a complete fiasco.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. A supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the obvious supplementary would be, obviously, with fewer councillors representing more residents, obviously, acknowledgement that councillors will need more support from officers might be a call. And I wonder how we will do this, given the need to create efficiencies, i.e. less staff, bigger areas.
You raise a really important point. What I would say to you is that there are models where you can provide more local support. Some councils, you know, work with the concept of the local councillor as the cabinet member for their area and design their services in order to support place and local delivery. So this is something that has been done before, but you're right to say, I don't think it's a question necessarily of saying, oh, we need an officer to support. It's about saying you design your council It's something the government has talked about, you know, about the role of frontline councillors, as they call them, rather than backbench councillors. You know, perhaps if we weren't stuck in this local government reorganisation, we ourselves could be pushing ahead more on that agenda. So I think there is an opportunity here, and I suppose that would be the other point I come back to my previous answer, which is if the government gives us time, if we are able to get consensus that this is a chance to change things and, you know, for example, strengthen the support for local representation, then this could genuinely deliver improvement. But there needs to be a recognition that it's more than, you know, a cut down, slammed together version of what we're currently doing. If we're prepared to look for opportunities and transformation and the whole question of how we manage local identity and local delivery in these larger unitaries is a really, really important one. And it's certainly my hope, and it will be something I am advocating very strongly in the process as we go forward, that we take this seriously and we make it part of our plan for how we think local government could be reorganised in Hampshire and the Solent area.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. The next item of business this evening is agenda item 4, local government reorganisation in Hampshire and the Solent, agreement to a joint interim plan. Report CL 174 refers and is included in your agenda packs on pages 5 to 6. There is a cover sheet to report CAB 3502, which is a Cabinet report concerning an agreement to a joint interim plan regarding local government reorganisation in Hampshire and the Solent. This is included in pages 9 to 48. Members, the recommendations for Council are as set out in report CL 174 and also on the agenda. In summary, these are that the Council firstly considers the Cabinet report and makes any comments to Cabinet to consider, and also that the Council note that the Cabinet is asked to approve the submission of an interim plan for local government reorganisation. The interim plan is as set out in the appendix to report CAB 3502. I would like to ask the leader if you could please introduce the report.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so colleagues, as you know, on February the 5th, Jim McMahon, the Minister of State for Local Government and English Devolution, wrote to me to formally invite me to work with other council leaders in our area to develop a proposal for local government reorganisation and to set out further detail on the criteria, guidance for the development of proposals and the timeline for this process. We were given a date of March the 21st to come back with an interim plan. Since then, we've had at least 5 leaders' meetings, even more chief executive meetings, plus an awful lot of work on top. But at the end of that process, all 15 council leaders in Hampshire and the Solent have signed up to the proposal in front of us today. The government set out that interim plans should have the following content. As the first priority, they should identify any barriers or challenges. They should identify the likely options for the size and boundaries of new councils. They should include indicative costs and arrangements in relation to any options, include early views as to the councillor numbers, include early views on how new structures will support devolution ambitions, include a summary of local engagement that has been undertaken, along with further plans for wide local engagement, set out indicative costs of preparing proposals and standing up an implementation team, set out any voluntary arrangements that have been agreed to keep all councils involved in discussions as this work moves forward. And the proposal in front of you today goes as far as proved possible in doing that. It doesn't have maps, as you will all know, but it does agree the following principles. That first of all, the analysis should be based on economic geographies, principally Basingstoke, Winchester, Southampton and Portsmouth, although it goes on to say no decision has been made on the number of unitaries. The second principle was that there should be a sense of place and coherent identity, structure and local connections to shape the geographies. To support the other principles, options considers will include those which have boundary changes and those which do not have boundary changes. See if you can spot the area where it proved impossible to agree. Community engagement will be used to help shape final boundaries prior to final submission. Sensible population ratios between local authorities and any strategic authority. Consideration will be given to the impact on crucial services, and proposals will show how new structures will improve local government service delivery and outcomes. And new proposed authorities must also be able to form a platform for financial sustainability and resilience to withstand financial shocks. We also agreed that where we can't agree, we will look to the data. Potential options would be appraised in detail. So this is not just, a superficial exercise. We are going to do a proper job on this, overlaying quantitative and qualitative data, especially including demand and cost in different areas, but also reflecting consultation with the public and with local partners and stakeholders. From Winchester City Council's point of view, these principles address the most important points that you've made in the councillor briefings that we've held. They reinforce the importance of Winchester as a centre. They make it clear that we want the views of local communities to be a critical part of the process, particularly if anybody wants to change district boundaries, but also make clear that we will look carefully at potential options, reviewing the relevant data and views of local stakeholders. We want to come out of this with a council that can deliver for our residents and our area. But we did raise the following barriers and challenges. The first thing we need clarity on as a set of councils is the principle of boundary changes and boundaries in general. How strict is this 500,000 limit? Now, we have heard a lot anecdotally and via feedback and via various meetings that it isn't that strict, but we need to hear that. Otherwise, forming proposals becomes really hard. And then the second point on this area is that are boundary changes acceptable to MHCLG? Because some of the authorities feel very, very strongly about them, and some feel the opposite. But one question we're asking them now, because there's a lot of theories thrown around as what it takes to change boundaries, is there going to be a proper mechanism to deliver them? The second area that we highlighted, where there was unanimous agreement, was that the Isle of Wight needed to be treated as having exceptional circumstances. And that needs really, really early confirmation. Even if the government takes time to respond to our other points, we need to know that really early, because if they're going to tell us that they're not going to be treated as an exceptional case, then the project gets very, very hard indeed. We highlighted the challenge of critical service demand. And this is a real challenge. Adult social care, children's services, especially SEND, and homelessness. So not just county problems, but also district problems as well. And they don't all fall equally across the area. That's something we need to understand. And a point was made, I was at the recent district council network, which is for the most vulnerable children and adults, they should not notice the change. And that is incredibly important. We have people who are being supported by the county, people who are also being supported with their homelessness, where any disruption will be unacceptable. And that needs to factor into our thinking about not just the design of the endpoint, but also the transition to get there. And we have asked for support for implementation and ongoing financial sustainability. So there's a thing called exceptional financial support, where councils need to go beyond the normal rules in order to be sustainable. Southampton has already received it. Hampshire has already requested it. You'll remember their 15% council tax increase request. And the Hampshire County Council deficit alone is set to be 136 million in 26-27. Now, the County Council Network loves to produce these reports where they name a big number that will be saved. And indeed, there's one that's come out that says that if you have the most extreme form of local government reorganisation, even the County Council Network's voodoo calculations with Price Waterhouse shows a saving of 112 million. And you might think, oh, 112 million, 136, nearly there. No, it's 112 million over 5 years, in which time the cumulative deficit is 650 million. So this does not solve the problem. You know, the county's own assessment on the most radical solution is so far off. It's £500 million off in 5 years. So it is a massive, massive problem. And if government is not serious about addressing this, then effectively we see what has happened in Somerset, and there's been a very useful SIPFA report that essentially says they didn't address this issue. They reorganised a council with major financial issues, and it is unsustainable. And the last thing we want, as I've said before, is we cannot create 4 unitaries that immediately, or 3 unitaries, or however many, that are immediately in financial crisis and at risk of failure. And then the last thing we've said, and this is just a reaction to how much work needs to be done and how long it's going to take. Somewhat bizarrely, earlier in the process, the government said, if you are setting up a combined authority, we will give you longer in order to respond on local government reorganisation. Somehow during the process, this came out as, if you're doing local government reorganisation, we will give you less time than other authorities to respond. And so something we've all agreed with is to say, don't give us till September the 26th, because as we know, 25th, you have to publish the papers in advance. Already that time is incredibly short. And we've asked for the longer timetable of November 2025. And these are all points that we all agree on. So when I say things like, we're all worried about the finances, that's 15 council leaders are worried about the finances. But the paper you have in front of you highlights and confronts these issues. You know, we are not running away from them. We are properly highlighting them. And we have managed to get one team of leaders from at least 4 different parties working together, making compromises, finding consensus, and taking the project forward. It isn't going to be easy from here on in. My personal belief is that we have to continue to try to work together in this process. And we've also worked together in this council, and I would like to thank those members who've taken part in member briefings and who've given me their input on what we're doing. And my commitment to you is we will continue to work together, because the input you've given me and the support and the insight has been really helpful to make sure that I can do the best job possible in standing up for our residents in our area. Because in the end, that's what it's about. This is about delivering for the people of the Winchester district, but also of Hampshire and its neighbouring authorities. And importantly, this is something I feel quite strongly about, and it sometimes gets forgotten, not just in an instrumental sense. We're not just here to deliver the services that central government to believe in are important, but in a democratic sense, where the people and councillors of an area decide what services matter to them, and we work to make those services and changes happen. And that will be our lodestar. As I said in one of the earlier questions, the way the government is running this process doesn't make it easy. But I do believe the paper in front of us sets out the direction and a way forward that we can follow. And that at least today, and maybe on the 21st, I'm not going to swear to the 22nd, we are all in one place going forward together. This evening, though, is about the decision we'll make tomorrow morning. And it's about listening, and it's about hearing your views.
because tomorrow at Cabinet we will seek to reflect the comments made this evening in our final decision, but also we will carry forward the views and thoughts that you bring forward this evening into the next stage of the process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Todd. I think if there are questions you would like to ask of Councillor Todd, the leader, please do.
Oh,
Councillor Warwick, please.
she got there first. Thank you, Leader, for that introduction. That was very helpful. And you alluded to announcements that we get sort of from time to time from the Minister, Jim McMahon, and I think he made one today. I don't know if you picked it up. He was talking about the policies set out in the English devolution white paper are supportive of communities and the localism agenda. And he specifically referred to assets of community value. And it got me thinking, you know, how can we empower our parishes and our sort of first level of local government, if you like, with additional requests which may come forward to protect certain assets as this process goes forward over the coming months. And will we have enough support to support assets of community value applications? And will you be requesting further financial support from government to the City Council for those sorts of applications? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, the paper we have says we need support to manage this entire process. And one of the disappointments is that they've talked a big game on support for parishes and community councils, but we haven't seen much sign of it. I confess I have not heard directly or indirectly any requests as far as assets of community value are concerned, but we have laid out in our council plan that empowering parishes to be fit and ready to deal with this new world of local government reorganisation is one of our priorities. We will have a lot to do in that journey. So I don't want to stand here tonight and say, yes, yes, we can definitely do it. Yes, yes, we definitely have the resource. But we are going to be open to any requests that we receive from parishes, not least because I held a briefing with parishes and asked them to ask me for what they wanted. And as those requests come in, we will do what we can to meet them. If we get overwhelmed, we may end up having to make choices. But for the time being, our intent is to support those parishes that want to get ready for this new world as far as we're able.
Councillor Godfrey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While there's been little time to consult residents over these initial plans, there has been just one poorly publicised online public event at the beginning of this month. The initial plan before us today includes a consultation activity. Yet I have seen no other plans for engaging residents on the options for a detailed submission, due to be completed by the end of April, according to this initial plan, or for gaining support for proposals from residents before the September submission. When will these engagement plans be published?
The first thing to say is that we put a lot of effort behind publicising that particular event. We publicised it, and that hasn't been the only way that we've sought to engage with people. So we did use all our electronic means of communication, which is frankly what we've been able to do in the time available. We've also consulted with businesses, we've consulted with charities, we've consulted with parish councils, and we've asked parish councils to take the message forward, and we've made an offer to parish councils that we will support any public events that they hold. All I'd say is, well, we've also done considerably more than the national government has done on devolution, who tomorrow evening are holding their one event in person in the entire region in Portsmouth Guildhall at 6 o'clock. We're happy to share the booking details. Councillor Cutler has promised us a wild night out in Portsmouth afterwards to recover from the excitement. So it's better than the government's doing. So the answer is we have publicised it. We've used every tool available to publicise it, and we continue to publicise what we're doing. If you want to know what the details of the forward consultation will be, I refer you to the interim plan, which has a timetable for when we will be doing that consultation. Obviously, we need to get through this particular stage, but the detailed work plan of everything that will be done for the proposals as a whole will come forward in the next stage of the process as the leaders work together. And as soon as we have something specific to share, I will make sure that colleagues here are aware of it. In the meantime, we will continue with the work we're doing to engage with parishes, to engage with local businesses, to engage with charities, to engage, frankly, with anybody else who wants to engage with us. And as we get to particular points, I will also be keen to ensure that we have further public opportunities for people to engage with the process as well, and more than central government has done, which is not a very high bar, admittedly.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going through the interim scorecard that the government set and by which we're measured in the submission of this document, do you feel that the government are going to enter into a dialogue to get through a process, or whether this truly is a sort of a scorecard that they'll say, you've not ticked all the boxes and therefore you're dropped from the priority programme? Or will it be more of an iterative process, do you think? Have you had any indication of that? And particularly, I'm thinking asking for extensions and things like that, that are there certain aspects of this where you feel that that might just mean the government say, I'm afraid you're not ready for this? And if so, what does that mean? What are the consequences? I realise these are just going to be your thoughts on this, and thank you, Andrew.
As I often say to people, I think it's really important to see that there are two things here. And it is the devolution priority programme, and we are on that, and our upper tier colleagues are working very hard to have it ready for May next year. So I'm absolutely confident, and I'm absolutely confident that that is the government's #1 priority, to get metro mayors in place across the entire country. And nothing we can do in local government reorganisation will derail that. If they come back to us and say, because you're taking, you've asked for extra, I mean, we know we need more time. Okay, so we're asking for more time than they're offering us. So if their punishment is to give us more time, we will accept it with happiness, because we believe we need more time to do a proper job. The risk in all of this, but it's very unclear to see how it would happen, is that they impose a solution upon us. But, we're nowhere near that at the moment. And one of the reasons why we, as an authority, are determined to keep working with everybody as the process goes forward is that, frankly, we want to know what everybody's up to, see what the proposals are, and I'm pretty confident something will get submitted, hopefully in November, and we will do whatever we can to influence it in our direction. So I'm not entirely sure what punishment the government could throw at us. It's not like they've given us any money, which they could threaten to take away, so they can't do that. We're asking for more time, so they can't punish us by giving us more time. The only thing I could think of was, would they give us less time? But I genuinely don't think they're likely to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What a shame, you know, a beleaguered government, the party of which isn't even represented in this chamber this evening, imposing a top-down reorganisation on the people of this county, trampling over 830 years of history. A Stalinist reorganisation, establishing oblasts of 500,000 people across this country. Is this what our residents want? It's not what they've told me. I suspect it's not what they've told our colleagues, my colleagues. Nevertheless, if this is how it must be, if this is what's imposed, then we must make the best of it. Most of this fantastic district is parished, meaning residents have a council of their peers looking after their neighbourhood and the fabric of their town or their village. But here, in the glorious city of Winchester, we do not. We require assurances here that the needs of the city will be protected and the needs of its visitors, and more importantly, its residents, will be considered. Today we have a town forum, very ably chaired, if I might add, and with a financial precept, but tomorrow we may find ourselves that this is a city of 40,000 people in a swelling sea of over 500,000. So I guess my question for the leader is, what assurances can he give that the particular requirements of the residents of this city, of the city of Winchester, will be considered in this thrilling, wider upending of local government arrangements?
Councillor Todd?
I can give you an absolute assurance that one of the priorities we've put in the council plan, which we will deliver on, is that every area of our district will be represented by a local community or parish council. And we have already started the work to ensure that we move to a community governance review for the city of Winchester. So we're absolutely clear about that. It's a resourced project. We've had the request from the Town Forum. We respect that request from the Town Forum, and we will be moving ahead with it. So obviously there is a consultation step in all of this. Obviously it's not something we could just impose without properly listening to the views of local people, but it's clearly the right thing for us to do at this stage. And indeed, we're advising other authorities that they should also look at parishing to make sure that the different interests of the communities that they represent within a larger authority are properly represented.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It was just sort of almost a supplementary to Councillor Godfrey's question earlier. I know Councillor Cutler has met with the Southern Parishes Group, organisation of multiple parishes. The Southern Parishes are going to be particularly, but well, potentially, there's still so many unanswered questions, impacted by potentially splitting off into Portsmouth or Southampton, or remain with a sort of mid-rural or even a Basingstoke-led authority. So can I just double check that those opportunities to sort of come to those Southern Parishes meetings in particular, which I think was quite useful at the time, would be something that the Cabinet would be willing to do in the future?
I'm prepared to make two guarantees to you. One is, firstly, we will absolutely, and we've made this promise and we will continue to do it. We have promised to attend meetings with parishes and we will continue to do so. And I realise many of you do this all the time, but you know, we're going to join you at some of them. And the second thing is, you know, I am absolutely committed to making sure that the voice of Southern parishes, of the Southern parishes and their communities they represent, will be properly heard in the process going forward. That is an absolute guarantee. It was something that I explicitly put into the process and have been advocating for in my conversations with other leaders as well, and will continue to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Tippett-Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't underestimate the huge ramifications of these changes, and I don't think any of us should. And this council, like many others, have been put in an invidious position to prepare this plan, the interim plan, in a ridiculously short period of time. And I know for a fact that this council has done absolutely everything possible to engage with residents, businesses, charities, as Councillor Todd said. And indeed, there's been a particularly exceptional engagement by Councillor Todd and the team with all councillors here on all sides. And so the leaders should be commended for this. As a representative for the City Ward of St Bartholomew, I know that local residents of Winchester City will be concerned about the protection and the care of our valuable city assets. And they'll be concerned about having councillors that are disconnected from the needs of Winchester City. I'm conscious of the positive statement in this paper about the Winchester Town Forum looking into a governance review about the possibility of creating a town council. My question is just to see if this is progressing all right, given the huge pressures that there are on council officers and the cabinet team.
Absolutely, and the sort of historic assets of the city and everything that that goes with it, and actually the mayoralty, which you haven't touched on, but is also something very important to us. It reminds me that I was at a conference near Runnymede of the District Council Network, I think last week, and I heard a government minister reference the importance of the Magna Carta, and I had to be held back from standing up and pointing out that people in Winchester have been choosing their own leaders, their own mayor, 15 years before the Magna Carta was signed. Quite right. So one of the bits of preparatory work, one of the things that really matters in thinking about the needs of a town council for the future is thinking about the finances of it, the model, the assets it has, the costs it operates under. This isn't just about saying, oh, let's create this thing. We need to have a sense of what is it going to be responsible for, what assets will it take on, what cost does that imply, does that enable us to get rid of the special charge that we have in Winchester, but then what it would be the implication for the resulting precept that a new parish would be charging. So there's a lot of quite detailed work, and the finance team are already thinking about that. The asset team are already thinking about that. We were looking at the detailed work plans for the year ahead yesterday, and the teams that need to be working and thinking about those issues are working on them now.
Thank you. Councillor Langford-Smith, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to follow on from Councillor Williams' question with a little bit more specifics, as you might expect from me. Can the administration please advise what the position is with regards to the area that I represent, Denmead? Portsmouth have made a statement that they wish surrounding district areas to be merged into it. It's on page 4 of their statement, so that it may become a continuing authority. The proposed South East Hants unitary comprises Portsmouth, Fareham, Gosport and Havant, to include small areas of neighbouring authorities to help drive economic and housing growth, improve the council tax base and financial sustainability, and mitigate high levels of deprivation that concentrates in South East Hampshire. Can the administration tell the residents of Denmead that Denmead is off the negotiating table, despite what Portsmouth say? Thank you.
So, I can tell you what my position would be, and my position is, and it's the same position as was laid out by the leader of Portsmouth City Council in their debate last night, which was actually, I think, more nuanced than the paper you summarised. And he was absolutely clear that there are areas in neighbouring authorities, and he particularly talked about, I think he made a reference to the areas in Fareham that have an SO postcode. Which way do they look towards? And then he did touch on, he actually said Southwark and Wickham, he didn't say Denmead, communities that maybe look towards Portsmouth. But then he went on to be really clear that the step that he wanted to take was to consult those communities and hear their views. And that's my view. That's the point I've made repeatedly throughout this entire process, The argument I have made is that we need to distinguish between what I would call contiguous areas. So if you can walk from a unitary or from one council into another, and the roads are paved, the street lamps are up, the buildings are there, you can't quite tell which when you crossed over. That is one thing, and that is one discussion to have. But as soon as you start talking about countryside, different character of community, then the point that's in the principles about the communality of principle becomes really important. And indeed, I appreciate the input that you made on this topic, and I've also heard from colleagues in Southwark and Wickham, to say that the communality that people are looking for in their council, in those areas, is from a council that understands the needs of rural areas, that understands villages, that understands market towns. And actually, again, if we get this right, there's an opportunity, because we can have contiguous urban areas that do a really good job for those urban areas. But we also need to recognise that, the middle of Hampshire is different. And we can have an authority, potentially, that does that really well as well. And if you look to the north, where you're into the more, sort of M3, M4, more high-tech area of, where we have the aerospace industries and other such things, then that can be quite a sensible, contiguous area, which gets really good at running that kind of area. And so I think there is an opportunity here which mustn't be missed, which is to say we can potentially create councils that do a brilliant at a certain set of things and do that really well. But, and there's a big but, there will be discussion about the finances. And that is going to be a challenge in all of this, which is, if I compare Portsmouth and Winchester, for example, the Portsmouth district, or the Portsmouth unitary and the Winchester district, we have a population of about 130,000, and they have a population of 210,000. If you look at the council tax base, which is like when you equalise the number of council taxes to the number of bandees, I think roughly, this is order of magnitude, it may not be exact, we have about 55,000 bandees and they have 60,000, because they have lots of bands A's and B's. So when they go out and collect, let's say the bandee, 1,500, 1,000, however much it is at the moment, from the county, they're actually not collecting band Ds, they're collecting band A's and B's. And yet at the same time, they may have really high demand. So some of the issues that have been raised about, scale and how big authorities need to be and what sort of areas need to be into them are going to be important. I think the thing that worries me most, and this is something you may wish to raise with your county councillors, which is this mustn't turn into a spreadsheet exercise. It's got to be more than that. There are really important questions about children's services and adult social care. They are really important. They are really serious. Any new council, it's going to be 70 to 80% of their spending. But there are other models. You don't just have to create enormous authorities. There are small unitaries that deliver outstanding children's services or outstanding adult services. I think there will be elements where we need to be looking on a larger scale in terms of what happens. So, for example, there was a debate today about Stubbington and the fact that we need a new secure unit, but we don't need a new secure unit in Hampshire. We need a new secure unit in Hampshire, Portsmouth, Southampton, and the Isle of Wight. There will be areas where we may actually say, part of the problem is that the scale of what we're doing isn't big enough, and we need to be looking at wider collaboration than we manage today. Sorry, it's a bit of a side point here, but all I will say to you is I'm absolutely committed to aiming for that, council with a community of interest, and to making sure that our people's voices are heard and properly reflected in the decision making.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Horrell, please.
Mr Mayor, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Todd, for your commitment to keep talking to all city councillors in this chamber. I would ask that as this process continues, and inevitably gets tougher, that you continue to do so. I think that level of communication amongst us all has been helpful. But Councillor Todd, do you think the local authorities in our area are acting in a mature way, and where there are differences, are they all being upfront about those? In your meetings, are you trying to reconcile them? But if you cannot, are we prepared for government to make judgment on our behalf, which is exactly the words they have said they would, their words and what they would do? And are the authorities with a different point of view, such as Basingstoke, who voted additionally over and above the interim plan on some specifics for their area, are they also submitting those to government on Friday, or are they just waiting to next week to stir up the pot? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Of course, everyone is being mature, but people make different judgments as the best way to have an impact. My personal belief, and I'm not saying anything different to what I've said to other leaders, is I would personally not want to put a target on my back as a district leader. And I think the government will not value disunity. There is a lot of stress within the system. The county's papers that have been put forward have caused a great deal of concern, and there is genuine bafflement as to why they decided to do it now. But the one thing we have all agreed is there will be one submission on Friday. That did take quite a bit of negotiation. But I have been absolutely clear that there will be one submission. It's actually, believe it or not, being sent by me on behalf of all the councils. And that is the thing that we've agreed. And in the end, we are not in a position to stop independent other councils doing their own analysis or sending in their own information. But from my point of view, the more we can stay together and, you know, challenge each other's thinking and properly analyse what's going on, the better it will be for all of us. I mean, I will say I'm very disappointed that the county has done a big piece of what I would call fairly superficial analysis about the right configuration for the county, and it's trying to establish its own principles without any scrutiny, without taking the papers or the analysis or the workings to any committee of councillors at the county, without bringing it to the leaders of other authorities to give us a chance to understand their proposals. And I don't think that's very helpful. I don't think that will lead to the best outcome for all authorities in the county. And so my personal point of view, and what I will be seeking to try and do throughout the rest of this process, is to try and keep us all together. And that will recognise that people have very strong, different views. But I do think the best way forward is for us to all be in the room, to have a chance to scrutinise and understand those views, and to see if, after having done that, we can find a way forward. And then if we can't, we may need to go in different directions. But again, there's a bit of me that says, even if there are multiple strands of the work, I would like to know that there are not any kind of sloppy assumptions, poor thinking, badly thought through elements of those proposals that disadvantage this district and the people in it. So my intention would be to keep talking to everybody and to try and hold the whole process together.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Godfrey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The leader mentioned that the County Council has published updated information on demographics and service usage for the whole of Hampshire. This information would seem to cover at least 85% of all the services that the new unitary authorities will be delivering. How does the leader expect to use this information supplied by the County Council to justify the decisions on unitary authority groupings, and what other evidence will also be used?
So I think there's two ways into this. So as you say, the largest part of the cost that any new authority will face does sit primarily in the areas that are handled by the unitaries and the County Council. And so what we have asked for and what the chief executives are working on is that we have a proper decomposition of that cost down to district or even more local level, so that as we look at different scenarios, we are able to properly model them in terms of their financial viability and sustainability, and that we're all working off one common data set, although on a far more granular level than the superficial PwC analysis that you've seen, because in the end, that is assuming a flat rate of demand across the entire county. It is assuming a flat rate of income across the entire county. It is making some, I think it makes quite a lot of assumptions on a nationally standard basis as to the kind of savings that can be achieved through unitarisation. It's not adjusting those formulas, as far as I'm aware, for the different situation in different areas. So to me, it's a kind of rhetorical piece of analysis rather than a detailed piece of analysis that gives us any real guidance as to what the actual configuration of authorities that we will end up with in this county is concerned. And so that's why I and others and the chief executives have all agreed that what we really need from the county is proper decomposition of that cost, and the work is also going on to understand the costs within districts as well, so that we can have a proper, grown-up, fact-based, specific discussion about what new configurations look like. The second thing I would ask for, and I sort of touched on this earlier, there are a lot of ways in which smaller unitaries or groupings of unitaries manage the cost and quality, particularly of these expensive services. There's a lot of innovation in this area. There's a lot of ways in which people are using trusts or taking out very particular services that need to be delivered on a large scale and coming to arrangements that make that work while enabling human-sized authorities, but also enabling the quality of performance on these critical services that are needed. And to me, if we just treat this as an empty spreadsheet exercise, we are not going to get the right answer. We need to be having serious conversations about what those services are, how they will perform, what changes we might need to make, and how that will lead through to the right answers for everybody in the entire district, in the entire county and unitary area. The other thought I'd give you is that, and one of the problems I have with the county analysis is it seems to be totally focused on the needs of whichever bit the county ends up in. And I don't think that's what the government's after. I don't think they're asking for an analysis that stops at the edge of county borders. If I was the government, I'd be saying, absolutely right, that the Isle of Wight, is its own unitary. But what are you going to do as a collection of politicians in Hampshire and authorities in Hampshire to make the system work as a whole? I don't want to have a system where young people at risk on the island get a worse service than young people at risk in Hart or Gosport or anywhere else. And so I do think there will be a challenge to us to say, okay, how are you going to make the system as a whole work? And I don't see any of that coming from the county analysis at the moment, and I think we need to see it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful to the leader for that previous answer, but a different topic. We have many shared interests with Basingstoke, such as the Hospital Trust, the local economy, educational institutions, transport links, and the rural downlands and the biodiversity that it contains. But I hear that neither Winchester nor Basingstoke councils have made any serious investigation of the options for our two councils, council areas to be part of the same unitary council in the future. What's the leader consider to be the important factors that should be considered in relation to this possible grouping?
I can promise you that I sat in the bar of the DCN conference and had a long conversation with the leader of Basingstoke about options. On a more serious basis, as you know, Basingstoke has expressed a very clear view as to what they would like their authority boundaries to look like. It takes two to have a conversation. There have been other people keener to have conversations with us. But that does not mean that as the right scenarios emerge coming out of this entire process, that we will not have conversations with any neighbour to identify, frankly, well ahead of implementation of any unitary opportunities for collaboration. I'm very happy to have conversations with Basingstoke. When I look at travel to work areas, how people move around, the thing that's actually quite surprising is the degree to which Basingstoke does kind of look east-west in a way that we don't. And our connectivity is in other directions. But that doesn't mean that we won't talk to them. But frankly, I don't think this is a matchmaking exercise. You know, we're not playing Tinder for local authorities here. This is about a serious analysis of how we design configurations that work in the long term. And so there's been a lot of early discussion of what I sometimes refer to it in passing as vibes-based analysis of what the configuration should look like. We are now going to be moving into a stage where it has to be more hard-headed than that and looking at the details of service configuration and staffing and cost and all the other factors, you know, and tax base and income and demand and all of those other factors, and how we create configurations of councils that are sustainable for the long term. So I'm always happy to talk to Basingstoke. I talk to them all the time. I'll talk to any authority where they'll talk to us. But please, don't assume that we're not talking to Basingstoke because we've closed our mind to it. We're very open to all options. But you do need somebody to talk to on the subject as well. I mean, I could go and stand in Festival Place and talk to myself in front of everybody, but it would be a bit pointless, really. I do need somebody to talk to me.
Councillor Lee, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lead, I'm very pleased to hear that we're conducting more than a balancing financial spreadsheet exercise with savings. But it's also more than about just services to people. And in the conversation this evening, we haven't talked about prioritisation of climate or nature. The environment transcends governance boundaries and arguably should be central, I believe, to the reorganisation in some way. So can I ask, what models would we be considering? And if I look back through previous local government reorganisation, devolution by other authorities, this seems to be a weakness, an omission. And I know why, because the devolution paper does not talk about mandatory statutory climate and nature duties. And this is very worrying. And as part of this is, as well, surely we should be also talking about the national parks. How will they be considered? I was recently on a call talking about the new management plan for the national park, which is part of the new local plan review. And they seem slightly concerned. And I just wonder, what are the thoughts there? I've heard nothing about that this evening. And rather concerningly, the consultants supporting this process don't have this remit, and neither do I see that they have the expertise to incorporate these considerations. So the question I would ask as well is, in the covering letter to the interim plan, which we'll be sending off, will we be able to raise some of these notes as observation and notes to ensure that a more balanced forward-thinking approach for devolution in local government reorganisation might be considered. We do not need to follow what has gone before when we know that what's gone before has not delivered the savings that we would have hoped for. In fact, the exercise we're undertaking is expensive, it doesn't deliver the savings, and one wonders whether it would ever deliver some savings. I guess the jury's out. And my final point is, it's not all about the bottom line, it's about the triple bottom line. It's getting the social, economic, and the finance aspects, the economic aspects, properly balanced. And again, I'm not hearing that. Now, and that's probably because it's not in the devolution white paper. Is there something we can note in our covering letter to cover the interim plan? So I'm not trying to be difficult, I just don't think there are clear lines of progress on some of these important issues. Thank you.
I've just chaired 5 meetings of leaders to get the current document agreed, and I am not going to negotiate a letter. I am going to negotiate a letter, but the way I will get a letter through all the leaders, because bear in mind there is a wide diversity of interest, is it will say something like, "Dear Minister McMahon, please find attached the letter from Hampshire and the Solent. Yours, Martin Todd, on behalf of all the councils in Hampshire," because that is not the place to do it. If we want to say something about those issues, you do it in the document, you don't do it in the cover letter. But actually, most of what you were talking about is devolution. And that's where there is definitely a strategic opportunity, this will be part of our feedback, for a duty to take the climate and nature emergency more seriously. Because that, to me, is the bit that's missing at the moment, a joined-up strategic approach. And inevitably, it would cover that part of the South Downs National Park that is within the Hampshire and Solent area, and it would cover that part of the New Forest National Park, which is within Hampshire as well. And I say that part of because about 2% of it is in Wiltshire. So that, I think, is the way in which national parks will be mostly involved in this process. And that is the way that we can get a proper strategic approach to climate and the nature into the process. And indeed, I will be making that argument tomorrow at Hampshire County Council to say that that should happen. In terms of the challenge with the unitaries is a slightly different one because we're some way from establishing them and there's lots we need to do in the meantime. And in the end, they will set their own priorities, as we have identified before. It is not possible to bake in priorities. And so ultimately, the way we will deal with this and the way I intend to deal with it is to do my absolute utmost to ensure that whatever the administration is of any new unitary, it puts the climate emergency and the nature emergency at the heart of what they're doing. In the way that if you turn to the relevant page of this document, we have said we are doing and will do for this council for as long as the local plan, our council plan continues to run. You know, my intention, my goal would be not just that Winchester City Council goes greener faster, but that any successor unitary also goes greener faster as well.
Let's carry on, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to just follow up on one other thing, and that is this issue, what I call is the democratic deficit. And you touched on it already. And I'm looking at the Wiltshire Area Board model that sets local priorities, allocates resources, oversight of highways, footways for improvements with some grant-making powers, and so on. And then when you add that to the new planning and infrastructure bill, the voice of our local communities is going to be diluted, if not neutered, it would seem. So I wonder how strongly we will be able to play that sort of local board approach to ensure that the voice of our local communities is played out strongly. Thank you.
One of the pieces of work that I want to get underway as soon as we can afterwards is to build on the experience of other unitaries, but also other councils that have dealt with this issue of local identity and dealt with it well. And, you know, within Hampshire, there are different models that people have used in order to try and drive this change. You know, there's the Test Valley has done a lot in this area, and then Eastleigh has done a lot in this area with its area committees. It's done it in a different way. And you talk about the example of Wiltshire. One of the things, you know, we have in our council plan is listening and learning. And actually that, I suppose, is slightly touching back to what everybody was saying earlier, which is let's really listen to what other people are saying in the process. Let's go out and find good practice. One of the lessons of local government reorganisation is you need to be planning your transformation and change right from the very start. If you leave it, wait till the council's established and then start trying to work out how to go forward, then you are not going to succeed. And so from my point of view, I'll ask Laura to sort it out with the other chief execs. Sorry, I'll ask the chief executive to sort it out with the other chief execs. I want us to be really serious about this and to really look at other places that have done it well and see what we can learn from them, because there are also some that haven't, and I don't want to be in that situation.
Thank you. Councillor Rutter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Councillor Todd, for all of that. My overall concern is that this overall proposal effectively removes local from local government. And you have reassured me that we will be doing our best to make sure that actually what comes out of Hampshire and the Solent is effective local government still. But I do think that the insistence by the government on 500,000 people in each unitary is ridiculous given our rural circumstances. And I do hope that they will listen to our pleas to remove that condition. I was also pleased to hear that Winchester's mayoralty, which is the second oldest in the country, and some would indeed claim that it is the oldest mayoralty, will be guaranteed through the formation of a new Winchester Town Council. As one of the local representatives of the parish of Headbourne Worthy, which includes the most of the new Winchester suburb of Kings Barton, can I ask for a reassurance that the boundary review, the governance review, and therefore a boundary review to bring forward this Winchester Town Council, will actually look at the ridiculous boundaries around Kings Barton, ensure that the new development is brought back together, or brought together for a first time, as part of that review, please. Thank you.
I think what you're saying is you'd like the boundary to go straight up the Andover Road rather than jiggling about in the way that it does at the moment. Absolutely, if it's possible to put that into the process in a way that doesn't derail the whole thing, then we will definitely do that. I think it would be foolish not to. I mean, I may be told that it's not possible, but I'm with you in terms of thinking that if we do end up having a discussion about the Kings Barton community, it needs to be the Kings Barton community and not the Kings Barton community minus whatever houses were built on a field that happened to be in a particular place because the boundary wiggled when it was set. So yes, we will make sure that those considerations are borne in mind and consideration of the wishes of the Headbourne Worthy parish and the different communities within it is also something that's very much being thought about in terms of any planning for a community governance review.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I go back to the listening and learning theme? The devolution white paper is very clear about, the value people put on the community. And it seems to me that even at this point, after several weeks, we have failed to talk adequately to our residents. Many people have said to me, when do we get our chance to give our view? And that is asking them, what do they think about the whole process of local government reorganisation? What do they want from us on their behalf? What are their expectations in terms of the outcomes of this, rather than just being presented with a fait accompli once all the leaders have managed to find some consensus around the unitaries. So when you look at the timetable, the line is on there about consultation, but it doesn't really take on board what people are saying now, we'd like to have the conversation with you now before you put the whole thing to bed. So when and how could we engage our residents more fully in this whole discussion about local government reorganisation? And could you commit to doing that for the Winchester residents, even if that isn't the plan across the whole Hampshire and Solent area? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Certainly when we have compared the level of engagement and level of public meetings engagement, other presentations that we've made to different areas, I'm not aware of any other authority that's come close in terms of the amount that has been done. And one of the reasons we're talking to parishes, having invited the parishes in your area to participate, is precisely because we can't talk to everybody simultaneously. Although, as a backstop, we have made available, which we have circulated using all the means available to us, online meetings where people have been able to come and ask their questions and have their views. So we will continue to do that as the process goes forward. The truth is that when I talk to people, I mean, firstly, there is an awareness problem. So people don't even really know if it's what's happening. And when you talk to them, they're mostly sort of fairly shell-shocked. And they're sort of interested in the process, but it's quite hard conceptually for them to see how it's going to affect them. What I suggest we will end up doing is focusing our discussions in those areas where there is already clear that there is concern and people are looking at potential outcomes which they're not potentially very keen on. The truth is, most of the scenarios that have been looked at so far say that the area around Winchester is unaffected and remains at the centre of whatever authority we end up with. Now, people will have views in terms of how big or small that authority should be and who the neighbours should be, but they're not very strong views, as from what I've seen so far. Where the views are strong and where I do think we need to listen to people are where people are saying, I'm currently in the Winchester district and it sounds like I might end up in Portsmouth. And, you know, we had that discussion earlier in the context of Denmead. And so we will continue, frankly, to take a lead in terms of the amount of engagement that we do and the extent that we try and engage with different communities. But it will probably be proportionately focused towards those areas where people are already realising that there could be scenarios that they're not very supportive of. We will keep those discussions open. We will continue to take a lead in our consultation compared to most other areas, if not all. But we will do so, you know, there is the timetable for the formal consultation process. And then the other thing is I would also say that as councillors, you also have a responsibility in this. You know, you have the ability to go out and talk to your local communities. You have the ability to take what's going on to parish council meetings. And I know some of you are doing this. And it is really important that what I would say is that it is such a complicated thing in some ways to explain to people that we actually need you to take responsibility for your area as well, because I think that will be the best way of doing it. You understand your area, you understand the people you're speaking to. You can actually provide that detailed discussion and answer questions. And then, as we have been all the way through this whole process, I'm completely open to whatever you bring back. So we do need councillors to play an important role in this, but we will also continue to do our own consultation, direct engagement with parishes, direct engagement with businesses, direct engagement with charities, etc., to try and ensure as many people hear about what's going on and have a chance to input as possible.
Thank you very much, Leader. I think it would be useful to finish with questions and move on to debate and see what salient comments we can come up with. Councillor Chamberlain, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're asked to consider the Cabinet report and make comments for consideration. And I offer this view in that I find it interesting, almost as we just touched on there, how relatively little airtime this subject has had in wider media, which I suspect itself maybe talks to the level of public engagement and discussion so far on this subject, whereas obviously for us as councillors, it's seemingly been every second discussion since before Christmas. I also find it interesting that whilst this is an interim plan and the process is at a relatively early stage, there is the emergence of discussion as to what this could potentially mean for southern wards in our district, which is obviously of interest to me as a Southern Wycombe Ward councillor and the residents that I represent. We've already touched upon it. In Portsmouth City Council papers and at a council meeting yesterday, there's a clear nod to the southern wards in the Winchester district, amongst other areas. And importantly, the acknowledgement of the need to understand the views of residents in this area via consultation, which I absolutely agree with. Personally, I think alongside the future plan for consultation as laid out in the interim plan before us, we need to challenge ourselves as to how do we make clear to residents what this could potentially mean to them going forward. For example, we have a potential scenario of market towns and village economies transitioning into city-centric authorities. We potentially have semi-rural and rural areas transitioning into areas with significant unmet housing demand. We've already touched on we potentially have fewer councillors working covering a wider geographic area. And as we already touched on a couple of times, the important question of what this means for debt treatment and any implications on council tax going forward for residents that may move into a different authority. And this is, as I see in the paper, is noted as one of the key issues raised from the online public briefing held on the 3rd of March. On this particular subject, I found it interesting that in last night's Portsmouth Council meeting, it was stated that without additional neighbouring areas, Portsmouth would be the poorest of the potential 4 unitaries in a theoretical 4 unitary model. Whilst this is absolutely a position I sympathise with in the context of the financial woes and the deficit at Hampshire County Council, it's hardly a sell to residents who live in the surrounding additional areas. Whilst I absolutely acknowledge the significant efforts of the leader and the chief executive, amongst others to date, and I support the interim plan as laid out, I do think it is key that we get in front of planning future consultation activities with residents, as we just touched upon. And as part of the future efforts, we're clear in working with our neighbouring authorities that it is an informed consultation on what reorganisation could potentially mean for residents in their local areas going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Lerney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we can all understand the potential benefits of unitarisation, clearer responsibility, less casework ping-pong, joined up thinking on development and transport, not being blamed for the county council tax just because we send out the bills. This council itself is the product of merging 2.5 smaller districts together as part of national reorganisation in 1974, aimed at having sensible municipal boundaries, and that did, incidentally, treat the Isle of Wight as an exceptional case. 50 years later, it does feel that it is time for us to look at this again, and personally, I would welcome changes which gave residents better local government. Unfortunately, this reorganisation plan isn't aimed at benefiting residents. It's a vain attempt to fix the results of years of local government underfunding without the Treasury putting its hand in its pocket. While well-run district councils such as this one have continued to perform well and deliver for residents, even while paring back services, most authorities with social care responsibilities have had to take a slash and burn approach, leaving roads in disrepair, schools in crisis, and communities without buses. Unitarisation will not fix the financial problems of social care, but further reduce other services and increase costs to residents. The leader referred to Somerset Council, reorganised in 2023 to make savings. This year, they're making £47 million in cuts, putting their entire commercial property portfolio on the market, increasing council tax by 7.5%, yet they still face a deficit of £100 million next year. Town and parish councils in Somerset have dramatically increased their presets, in some cases quadrupling in 2 years, as they have been forced to step in to take on services important to the public, such as parks, open spaces, public toilets, CCTV and street cleaning. With fewer councillors, there is less local representation and influence, with decisions taken miles away from the places they affect. Councillors will have more casework, more public meetings, farther to travel, and it will be harder than ever to attract the young working people we need to be reflective of our population. However, we do have to face the fact that with Hampshire County Council failing financially, whatever the government was, we would be being forced down the unitarisation route before very long. Opposing reorganisation is not going to stop it. We must not let decisions be taken out of our hands, but work with our neighbours to put together a plan which does give the best results for our residents in the circumstances. I think the leader's done an amazing job in reaching agreement to a set of principles which gives us the opportunity to present a united front and increase the chance of creating new authorities which are as financially sustainable as possible while reflecting local identity and interests. And I hope members will support moving forward on the basis set out, including the consultation. Thank you.
Councillor Godfrey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The proposed interim plan provides very little detail of the discussions and approach being taken by the City Council and its 14 partners to reach a coherent proposal that might deliver an efficient and sustainable structure for local government in Hampshire. I am worried that this will lead either to Hampshire being removed from a priority devolution programme or to government imposing a solution on Winchester that we have not had an opportunity to contribute to. My anxiety extends to the strong suspicion that common sense is being sidelined by the many conflicting parochial interests of the councils involved. My experience tells me that there will be 15 council leaders meeting to discuss the options, too many of them primarily concerned with defending their own fiefdoms rather than taking an objective view on what will work. There is a paucity of independently sourced published data that will justify a detailed submission to prevent subsequent adjustment of or the imposition of an entirely different structure by government. So I welcome the leader's assurance that more detailed information will be published soon. The information provided by the County Council tends to support the option for fewer unitary authorities, which, from my 18 years as a senior manager working for Hampshire County Council, seems logical. While small enterprises can often deliver excellent, focused services to their customers, it is almost always at greater expense than larger enterprises that deliver the same range of services. This is a simple matter of the benefits of scale that makes it cheaper and more efficient to deliver the same service to more people. In my time with the County Council, I worked on adult and children's services and social care projects. Each authority has to maintain a highly complex care record system to accurately record information about its service users, their carers, and their support networks. Just the annual licensing for these care record systems costs each department around £500,000 a year, to which must be added support and maintenance costs. These and many other fixed overheads do not significantly vary with the number of service user records or staff users on the system. These base costs will be largely the same whether it covers just one district area or 11 districts. Common sense tells us to minimise the number of fixed overheads to improve efficiency. we will have enough turmoil in Hampshire with whatever structure is implemented, with all changes taking up any positive savings for many years to come. Maybe shared services delivery could work, and small authorities may work, but they are rarely efficient. Just look nearby at the Isle of Wight, at Slough, at West Berkshire, all small unitaries that have struggled in large part due to the small scale of their responsibilities. We should be encouraging the leader to seek genuinely efficient and sustainable proposals for reorganisation, as well as to commit to genuine engagement with our residents on both the options for reorganisation and to garner support for our preferred detailed submission.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And firstly, on the point of devolution, the fact that we have the four authorities, the county, Southampton, Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight, agreeing to move forward and to form the combined authority with an elected mayor in 26, I think is a positive position for us all, and that we should look to ensure that that delivers positively for our residents. Regarding local government reorganisation, I agree entirely with Councillor Todd's view that we should stay together. We shouldn't allow councils to go off-piste and give the government the opportunity to actually do something to us that we would rather not happen. So talking, communicating, listening is really essential. Learning from other authorities around the country is also essential. We should still with pride. There are many, many ways of doing this and some very successful models elsewhere. We should not miss the opportunity to learn in that proactive and positive way. As I said earlier, I'm very keen that residents are at the heart of this very plan, of this very important plan. Delivery of our outstanding services is essential. Our residents won't stand for anything less. But of course, our formula, our unitary formulas, whatever they might be, need to be sustainable. They need to be solid and ensure that we can ultimately deliver the services that they expect. And finally, Mr. Mayor, we should be aware of our staff. Can you imagine just looking in, wondering how all of this will materialise in due course? I know the Chief Executive is keeping a watchful eye on this, and we as councillors should be as constructive and as reassuring as we possibly can be. Their jobs at the council, that's their life, their livelihood, and we should be aware of the implications of the decisions that are being made. Thank you.
Councillor Latham, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I begin by saying that I support the submission to the government of the interim plan regarding local government reorganisation in Hampshire. I think it is the pragmatic and prudent thing to do in the situation we find ourselves in. But that being said, I do have reservations about the situation we find ourselves in. As we've heard, the idea of local government reorganisation is not without its merits. Unifying some services in one organisation makes a lot of sense. There's not a councillor in this chamber, I'm sure, who will not think it's a good idea for the people who collect the bins to be the same people who dispose of what was inside them. However, while the government is devolving some power, to its credit, closer to people with one hand in the form of the Hampshire and Solent Strategic Authority, it is taking with the other, with this implementation of local government reorganisation. By creating huge unitaries, it is taking decision-making power, representation and accountability further away from the people it affects. The government even touts as a benefit of this reorganisation that councillor numbers will fall. And I wonder, with democracy globally in retreat and a growing belief, even in this country, that a technocratic elite are running things, this might well be a mistake. The breakneck pace with which the government seeks to implement this change means that they are making oversights at best and mistakes at worst. Where is the formal role of town and parish councils in the white paper? What is the mechanism for breaking up districts, which presumably are not magically the right building blocks for larger councils? And of course, how are the deficits of adult and children's social care providers such as Hampshire County Council going to, again, magically disappear under councils with different names? I would urge the Cabinet in its negotiations to ensure that the voices of residents and of councillors continue to be heard, that local government is kept on a local scale, and that powers and responsibilities are kept as close to local people as they can be. Local government reorganisation should last a generation or more, and it is worth slowing down this time to make sure we get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clear, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I would like to thank Councillor Todd for his hard work and commitment during this process, and also thank you to the Chief Exec and all the officers involved. We do appreciate it. I think it's obvious that we must continue to play an active role in all discussions. This process is going to happen, and perhaps, you never know, in the long run, we may welcome this change, but please, I beg, remember, communities have a voice. We want local people's voices to be heard. We need community identity, for I fear southern parishes are at threat, and that is why the communities need to be heard. Obviously, there are several still unknowns, but I think the main goal is to get it through, and tonight we should approve the submission of the joint interim plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tippett-Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think there's been so little time and so much to consider with this local government reorganisation plan. There was 6 weeks' notice, I know the paper says, to produce this interim plan, to engage with residents and businesses and all of us councillors here. And this is all the while, I think we've not mentioned this tonight, all the while we forget this, that council officers, the Cabinet, the leader, still have a very packed business as usual to deliver day in, day out. And they are also, in 6 weeks, trying to produce this interim plan. So, I mean, unless the leader starts doing Teams meetings and forums in the middle of the night, I don't know, I can't quite comprehend quite how much extra consultation he could be expected to do in that time. And Councillor Todd does make a really, really good point about our role, all of us as councillors, in the public engagement exercise that faces us over the next few months now. The government has put us under huge amounts of pressure, and it all means that we all have to put our hands to the pump in terms of engaging residents. And Councillor Clear rightly says that communities really need to be heard, and we have a key role in doing that. And it's clear that this interim plan, which I support, allows us from now until September to really inject this council's key priorities into it. So as I really was noted Councillor Todd's point at the beginning of this debate, saying that he really wants to ensure the most vulnerable in our communities, their services are protected and they are supported. That is crucial. It's also, number two, making sure that these plans that whatever is created at the end of this plan ensures that we have authorities that do go greener faster. It's a fundamental priority of this council, going greener faster. It always has been. We don't just talk about it, we deliver it. We've been rated as one of the best councils in terms of our approach to tackling the climate emergency, and we can set an example for others in Hampshire. Like Councillor Latham, I do have real concerns about how the government are approaching local government reorganisation generally, but it's obvious from tonight we have no choice but to progress along this path. And I think with Councillor Todd and the team here, we've got very good drivers at the wheel as we progress through this process.
So I note on page 15 of the report, it states that there are no specific equalities implications for this decision today. However, as proposals are developed in more detail for the new unitary councils, there will need to be very careful consideration of the impacts on equality and diversity, in the same way that we are considering the impacts on local geographical representation. It is now over 50 years since the last major local government reorganisation, and yet we are still nowhere near to having gender equality amongst elected councillors. Winchester City Council is doing slightly better with 40% women councillors, but Hampshire County Council, Test Valley and East Hampshire councils, to name but a few, are only around the 30% mark. Barriers to female representation at local council level still obviously persist. That's half the population underrepresented, the very people who statistically use and rely on councils the most. Turning to the council staff, a gender pay gap still exists, mainly due to the fact that there is a higher proportion of women in the lower grade council jobs, as opposed to the more senior decision-making posts. So any major reorganisation and restructuring of council should tackle these issues from the outset, despite the rushed timetable. Otherwise, any new unitary council will fail to adequately represent the communities it is supposed to serve. LGR, as Councillor Lerney pointed out, could further exacerbate the lack of diversity amongst elected councillors. It could mean a lot less councillors who therefore will have a larger geographical ward area to cover, more travel required and more services to deal with. In short, it becomes a bigger job. This could potentially make it more difficult for anyone with caring responsibilities and full-time jobs to consider being councillors. I would like to suggest that our EDI forums, both staff and member groups, could be engaged in the LGR process to look at current research into these issues, the barriers to becoming councillors or barriers to accessing the higher paid council jobs, for example. Perhaps working with any future local authority partners. Our local political parties could also look at how they support future candidates.
Thank you. Councillor Brophy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, I suppose, offer a counterpoint to talking about listening to residents, which of course we must do, but how we listen to residents and which residents we listen to and what we're seeking to achieve when we ask them. We've been talking a lot about creating communities that have a sense of geographical identity to them, and I think that's incredibly important. But at the same time, I'm very struck about the fact that we're also, even at a micro level, incredibly diverse. I can kick a ball over my back fence into an area of the city with a lower life expectancy. Across my ward, I have, Southampton football players, and I also have some very low-income families and very, very small terrace houses. And I think the fact that we are a community together is what makes these the city, the district, a sustainable economic unit as well. So I think when we look into reorganisation and the new unitary authority we create, we should also, as well as thinking about the boundaries of that to make it a logical geographical entity where people like us all live, we have to realise that people like us is very, very diverse. And we have to make sure that whatever we create is an economically sustainable community and also a socially cohesive community that looks after itself. I go back to the point about Portsmouth noting they may become the poorest of the new unitaries, and I think it's important that we aren't in the business of beggaring our neighbours here as well. We need to make sure that Hampshire as a whole becomes a healthy community, and under devolution we will all be working together to create a kind of an entity in the region that is successful as well. So I think it's very important, as well as thinking about our own needs and our own neighbours and our own sustainability as a new unitary on an economic basis, we also think about the wider sustainability of the community and the region that we create.
Councillor Brophy. Contributions to...
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make no apologies for going back to talk about parish councils. The UK already has one of the lowest ratios of elected representatives to residents in the democratic world. Reducing council numbers, as already been emphasised many times, it would be just putting us at the bottom of the league table for effective local governance and democracy. The voices of our communities must not be lost in this process. And I fear, with the cost-cutting need for savings, that this is going to happen. Beyond the local government reorganisation changes, we must also remain alert to the wider legislative threats facing local democracy. And I've already mentioned the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, alongside devolution and reorganisation, which I've said poses real risks to local voice. I agree, and Councillor Todd has emphasised this many times, we must learn from other authorities. We must not make the same mistakes. And I would strongly advocate for the triple bottom line, you've heard me say this before, to underpin the outcomes of local government reorganisation, not just a financial spreadsheet exercise. I hope we will consider this carefully. And as somebody who's been through, painfully, 3 government reorganisations in my career, past careers, I know how painful this can be, and I'm feeling the pain of our officers before we've even started. So I do feel for them, and I will certainly be giving them all the support I can during this process. One of the other things that I noted in my previous government reorganisation experiences is that we then relied often on matrix management. And I think we should be thinking carefully about that as we go through this process. We must have clear lines of responsibility and accountability for delivery of services, and not intermeshing and creating matrices which don't work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have any more contributions to the debate? Right. Leader, would you like to sum up, please, and, if possible, list the matters that you will take forward to tomorrow's Cabinet meeting?
I will. Indeed, Mr. Mayor, I would be very happy to do that, although I've done them more thematically rather than a strict chronological order. So those of you who have written down in chronological order will be jumping backwards and forwards with your pen as you tick them off. I heard a range of themes coming through from colleagues this evening. First of all, can I thank everybody for the comments that you made and for standing up and putting your views forward. And so I'll try and, I hope I've captured them all. So the first sort of big area was keep talking to and working with our neighbours. Keep in the process. Play an active role in that process. Try and keep everybody moving forward together and learn from everybody, even if you may disagree with where they're trying to get to. But keep learning and make sure that we're part of those discussions. The one area where I heard really clearly you want more clarity is on the engagement plan. It's difficult while it's conceptual, but as soon as we get near to any kind of option and any kind of specific choices where people can see what the outcome is going to be for them, then we need to be talking to people and making those choices clear to them and giving them a chance to have their input. And throughout this, as we think about engagement, keep residents at the heart of our plans and our thinking. But when we're thinking about the needs of residents, there were some excellent points made by Councillor White and Councillor Brophy I thought were very helpful about this point about equality and diversity. Let's not drift into a council which is harder for people to participate in. We touched on age and gender, but there are other areas that affect participation, caring responsibilities and work. And we need to make sure that we're thinking about these councils, the wards, the design of the whole system in a way that firstly meets those needs in the longer term, but also is reflected in any engagement and planning. When we're thinking about engagement, the point has been made, make sure it's not just about listening to the noisy people. Make sure that we're listening to everybody and watch really hard, work really hard to make sure all voices are heard. After all, it's young people who are going to have to live with this system long enough, for example. We need to make sure that we know what they're thinking about these things. And one other area where I heard that as we talk to our neighbours, you want us to be taking a hard line, is this point about localism and local identity and empowering local councillors and communities. Not a hard line, but where you want to see action, you want to see work, you want to see us going out, learning from other places, finding good practice, and as Councillor Horrell put it, stealing with pride the ideas that other people have had to ensure that local voices are properly heard. And in that conversation with our neighbours, there's one other point that is really important here. Of course we'll end up, and the core of the job is to make sure that the interests of people in our district are concerned. But, you know, we need to think of the common humanity of Hampshire and the Solent. Every authority has to be delivering. We can't design a system where any bit of it doesn't work. And that's incredibly important. It doesn't matter who the hosting authority is or how the structure ends up. We need to push for a system that's going to work for everybody, wherever they live. And that brings on to the second sort of main area, which is about parishes and local communities and supporting them through the change. And there was an early question from Councillor Warwick about assets of community value. But then we got into sort of bigger issues. There's the very specific challenge. We know that there will be discussions about the southern parishes. And so we need to make sure that those communities have the support that they need and that we're working hard to make sure that they're consulted, but not just that they're consulted, but that those voices are heard and taken seriously. But it isn't just the southern parishes. We also need to be thinking about the town, because suddenly it could be an island within a much larger authority area, with a thorough plan for a potential town council, and as part of that, thinking about the relationship with Headbourne Worthy and other neighbouring authorities. And I also heard, and I appreciated, that you recognise the role of councillors in all of this. And I appreciate that, you know, your role in going out and engaging with your communities, helping people understand what's coming, helping them understand what impact it may have on them, and making sure that that is fed back into the team working on this project is incredibly important. And I appreciate any work you're able to do this. We had a brief discussion in passing in about devolution. That isn't the main focus of this evening, but it slightly comes back to the point about a total system approach. You know, if, for example, we end up with a combined authority that doesn't have a serious duty on the area of climate change and the nature emergency, then that's actually a problem for all of us. It's going to make it harder. There is urgency about making sure that we get that strategic approach on those issues across the entire area. And one of the ways that may enable us to do that is to continue to push for representation of districts in the interim combined county authority as well. And last but absolutely not least, and there's a reason why, and I think we might be the only people who did this, as we set out how our priorities for this transitional period that we go in, we put absolutely number one on the list, support our staff, and I'm glad that that was raised. And I'm also very glad that councillors this evening were talking in terms of them personally offering support to our staff and recognising the stresses that many people are under and being mindful of that in their interactions with them. But overall, have I got everything there, Chief Executive? Otherwise, I'll go into the last bit. Oh, well, I'll do the last bit then. Overall, I heard very clearly that while you have concerns, and we all share concerns about the process that we've been put into and the impact that we fear it may have on our communities, we believe that it is right that Winchester plays its part in submitting this interim plan. You support the issues and barriers that are raised within that paper. And you are, you know, you see what you need to see from us in that paper as well. So I do think we have a basis to move forward. I think we're right to submit this plan. But throughout all of this, as we go forward, put the needs of our residents, the need to deliver for our residents, the need to make sure that we come out of this at the end with a strong council able to represent the people of our communities across our area is paramount as part of a system that works for the entire region. But I will certainly be taking a recommendation to Cabinet tomorrow that we submit the interim plan. But all the input you've given this evening is extremely helpful for giving direction and helping me navigate the journey as we go forward from here. So thank you very much indeed for all your input and support and the comments this evening, and the work will continue.
Thank you, Councillor Todd, and you've been on stage through all the acts, haven't you? Now, officers, are there any points to add?
Mr. Mayor, I don't think I can add to anything that the leader has said there, but I am extremely grateful for the words of support from members, so thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations in report C174 are that we make any comments to Cabinet to consider, and the leader has summarised these. Members, do you have anything further to add? Right. I think we can assume that the Council therefore notes that the Cabinet is being asked to approve the submission to the Government of the interim plan for local government reorganisation in Hampshire and Solent. Of course, as part of the Cabinet's consideration, they will have regard to the comments that have been raised this evening. So, thank you, members. I think that concludes the formal business for this evening. So perhaps the officers can end the broadcast, please.